welcome to the video. You're watching a replay of a conversation between me, Heidi Silvestre, Ximena Aguilar Vega from the University of Stirling and Ugo Nanni from the University of Oslo about the last climate conference, COP27, that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh this year. Fantastic glaciologists I was with at COP27, and together we really want to bring you behind the scenes of the climate conference. We're fully aware that the climate conference is a pretty obscure event, and it was very important to us to tell you why you should care so much about these big climate conferences. The last climate conference took place in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. I was there just a week ago. And it's important to you to know about COP27 because the future of the planet was being discussed there, and also the future of humanity. So your very own future was also being discussed there. So we have for you half an hour with amazing scientists to tell you all about the nitty-gritty, the crunchy details, all the behind the scenes of COP27. So we'll perhaps begin while my fantastic friends are joining us. I'll begin with a very short introduction about what is COP and what are these big climate conferences. Well, COP, I know, is a very strange acronym. COP basically means Conference of the Parties. And what are the parties? And we have Ximena joining us. Hello. The parties are basically the countries, the 196 countries that have signed a big document that is called the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so this year, can you imagine, there were 196 countries gathering in Egypt to discuss about, kind of the state of the climate today, but also to discuss the kind of actions that countries can implement to fight the climate crisis together. And COP27 was the 27th climate conference ever. It was a very important one because this time around, COP27 was located in Africa. So it was described as the African COP. And why is this so important? Because it really gives the tone, it really gives a direction to the discussions, to the negotiations that take place in this massive assembly. And therefore, this year we knew ahead of time that a big point of focus was going to be something that is called loss and damage. And I'm sure that my two friends joining me now will talk about this. That basically, we have Ugo joining now. But basically, loss and damage was a very important theme this year. It's basically all the risks, all the hazards that the most vulnerable countries will face, and how the most developed countries, Hugo, don't hesitate to mute your microphone if you can, and how the most developed countries, how the wealthiest countries can help the countries that are developing to prepare for what's to come and to repair all the damages that they have already suffered. So we hope that you have tons of questions about COP27, because there's so much to talk about. And I'm so glad to have these two amazing glaciologists joining me. I know, Ximena, you have already been to COPs before. Ugo, I think it was your very first time. So I think I would love to hear about your own views about COP27, starting with Ugo. And perhaps to begin with, you can introduce yourself and tell us more about your own experience at COP.
Great. Thanks, Heidi, and welcome everyone. So yeah, this year was my first time at COP, and it was quite an amazing experience. On my side, I'm working on glaciers, both in the Arcs and the Alpes. And what I want to know is, will glacier be stable in the future? Or when those glacier can be unstable? When can it collapse, and why would it collapse? And of course, this is a question that is important for scientists because it's interesting, but also for the people living close to the glacier, which is a lot of people in the Alps, the Himalayas, the Andes, and also the Arctic. So that's what I'm doing when I'm doing research. but I went to COP for another reason. I went to COP to understand how people would negotiate about climate change, how people would make and take decisions, and especially, if they would listen to scientists, if they would listen to the people that observe the changes on a daily basis and understand these changes. And I also went to COP with the hope that I could make some change on my little, steps. That's why I came to COP.
Yeah, great. And I mean, I'm really curious because it was your first time. And I must say, to me, it was a pretty chaotic event. And I'm just curious to know, is it what you expected? I mean, what did you expect about these COPs before going there? And, what was your impression when you were there in this building? I mean, there were, 30 or 40,000 people? How does that compare with the expectations you had before traveling to Egypt?
So actually, it's quite a funny question because I think it was fitting the expectation I had, or I didn't have that much expectation, but I was not surprised. I was not surprised by the chaos. I was not surprised by the huge amount of people, by the difficulty sometimes to, join negotiation, join a certain events, understand what's happening. There's a lot of people from, all over the world. And it's one of the most important summits for climate change. So I was not expecting something smooth. And actually, a lot of people would say it was chaotic, but from my perspective, I found it, kind of a chaos where you can just find your way in if you are with the right person. And I think that was the strength of our, small community at COP, that we were with person and people who knows how it works and can guide us.
And it sounds obvious maybe to the people watching that scientists would travel to COPs. But was it really obvious for you that, you definitely wanted to go to COP? And did you meet many scientists when you were there? And I mean, why is it so important to have scientists traveling to these COPs, to these climate conferences?
So first, I wouldn't say it's that obvious for scientists to go there. When I told to my colleagues or to people I'm working with, that was going to COP, it was a bit, a surprise for them. It looks like scientists are still a bit thinking that they should stay in their office and then the science will find its way, they will find its way in a certain way from the offices to the policymaker without the need of an interface between science and policymaker. So it's not that obvious. And when I was at COP, I did not meet that many scientists, but maybe it was also because I was, trying to meet negotiators and politicians and policymakers. So that might also be because I was not looking for scientists directly, but I was looking for people to whom I could share the science. And that's why it's important to have scientists at COP, because it's important that we go there and share the science. And I found that when it's a scientist sharing the science, I had this, fun experience with one of our colleagues at COP. She's mainly on the negotiation side. So once we went to see a minister, and she introduced me as a scientist, and she was the negotiator. And when we were talking, when the minister had some questions, and he was asking me some question about science, and he was talking to her about negotiation. But the fact that you have two roles, one about negotiation and one about science, then you have a much stronger impact because one is factual and then the other one you negotiate. But you need to have these two weight when you are in the negotiation.
Yeah, and I think it's so crucial because I think in people's minds, it's very obvious that, the climate conference should be full of scientists, but it's actually quite difficult to meet scientists there. I mean, I remember the very first time I went to a COP was COP27 in Bonn in Germany. And I was introducing myself as a glaciologist. People couldn't believe it. I'm not joking. It was like, oh my God, there's a scientist here. And I think it's a little bit sad in a way, because we need this foundation of knowledge, of facts, of the science to help guide the negotiations. But I have a question again for you, Ugo, and then we'll move to Ximena. But you keep referring to the negotiations, and perhaps can you explain to us what are these negotiations? And I mean, how did you manage to get to the negotiation? You're not a negotiator. How did you get in? And what did you see there? I mean, what were these people, these negotiators, negotiating?
So first, if you ask me to explain the negotiation, it would be a bit difficult because I don't think that everyone, even in the negotiation as a negotiator, knows what's happening. Because so the negotiation is really a game of trying to give something, take something, give something, take something. And it's really entangled, and it's normal because we are trying to negotiate stuff at the global scale. So when you go to a negotiation as an observer, because I was part of an NGO, so we can go to certain negotiation and observe what's happening. And when we have the chance to be with someone that used to be a negotiator, which was part of our team, then he could explain us what's happening. Because sometimes they would say something and you hear something, but you need kind of subtitles because the negotiation is really this complex game. And the negotiation I went was mainly about, okay, what term should we put in the agreement? Why should we put this term? So stuff that could be, seems a bit very small details, but when you look at the global picture, it's really important to have one term, for instance, glaciers or oceans or forest, rather than one other term.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, thank you for taking us to the negotiations, because I mean, it's pretty intimidating to go into this massive room where every single country in the world is represented. And it's not necessarily scientists here who are negotiating the future, you know, negotiating these very important texts. Sometimes it's lawyers. Sometimes it is people with a really good scientific background, but it's not always the case. And a big point of negotiation, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, but was that notion of loss and damage. Is how can these wealthy, developed countries that have been using a lot of fossil fuels for decades and decades can help the least developed countries, to the most vulnerable countries, to adapt and to pay for the damage that has already been caused by climate change. And as you said, every word matters. I mean, I've been to negotiations where they keep arguing about a single word. To me, it felt really frustrating, but you have to understand that the decisions are all made on a consensus. So all the countries have to agree on every single word. And if one country is not happy, they have to keep discussing, you know, how to make everybody happy. So yeah, pretty obscure, the negotiations, but I'm really glad that you got the chance to go there. And perhaps I can move on to Ximena. And, you know, I'm also very curious about your own COP experience, because I know it's not your first time. I could see you going everywhere, trying to meet lots of people, making a big difference as well. And perhaps you can start by introducing yourself and telling us more about your COP27 experience.
Yes, sure. Well, first of all, I'm super excited and happy to be with both of you, Heidi and Ugo. It's really, really amazing. And well, I am Ximena. I'm a PhD student at the University of Stirling. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the color of glaciers and the marine system. And you might be wondering, but why on earth look at the color of glaciers and the marine system? Well, the thing is that through the color, you can track organic carbon, which is very important on the carbon cycle. So that's my job. That's what I'm doing. But I have another passion, which is art. About 2 years ago, I started thinking very seriously about the role of contemplation, about the role of language, and the exercise of listening, not just with our ears, but with all our senses, to actually change how we interact with the natural landscapes and animals, including us, of course, humans. So this was not my first COP. I joined last year at COP26 because I wanted to understand why things are staying relatively the same. If I mean, we have the science, we have the technology, we have the money to turn around from the path driving us straight to this cliff, right? So that's why I joined this amazing group of early career scientists to support the activities of this cryosphere pavilion, which it is important to mention that we have some areas at these COPs, at these conventions of the parties, where we have a huge space where we can find these amazing pavilions where most of the scientists and civil society gather to discuss and to present some of the most pressing problems and discussions around science, of course. So I was part of these early career scientists. And after this amazing experience, I mean, a whole new world opened to me. You cannot imagine how it changed my perspective in every aspect, in my professional and personal aspects. So this time at Egypt, I came more involved and committed to raising the paramount importance of the ice and polar oceans in our survival and the health of the planet. So yeah, this experience, this second COP was completely different to me, completely.
I mean, this is so interesting, and thank you for sharing your experience about COP27, because I think you have this dual background or dual experience of being a scientist, and you understand, like Ugo said, you know, how important it is to have this foundation of knowledge and to take this to COP. And luckily now, and hopefully it will be the same again next year, but there is this pavilion that you mentioned that is, it's literally a stage for scientists, you know, for scientists to share their science, hopefully to heads of states, to ministers, to climate negotiators. But it's very important to have this, but that sometimes it's not enough. And to me, these COPs are sometimes, you know, very cold, very dry, straight to business, straight to negotiating the climate. But why do you think, and I'm sorry to dig a little bit deeper into this because I think it's fascinating, but why do you think we should perhaps add another layer to this, something maybe more human, more about the emotions, the language? Do you think that art can help in the negotiations?
Yeah, of course, and that's actually one of my main drivers in general, not just in science, but I mean we have witnessed how politics and the diplomacy works. I mean we need something more. We need something from, at least from the perspective of a scientist. I mean, what drives change is not just numbers, it's not just this technical language. What drives people to change, to really put all our energy, efforts, and hope is when we have some feelings towards something. And I think that art is this path or this door that opens this possibility for us as scientists to bring all this information, what we already know, and to open the hearts of people, not just politicians, not just stakeholders, but also to scientists, because it is super important that we as scientists commit to deliver these messages from the heart, not just from the head, because that's the only way that we will be able to change things. So yeah, that's why I think that we have to start exploring another way to bring science to everywhere and to everyone.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, this is music to my ears, and I couldn't agree more. But now, you know, you're talking about how can we make a difference? How can we really go from the science to important decisions? And perhaps I'll go back to Ugo now and ask about, you know, are there any successes about this COP? Anything that was a highlight for you in terms of maybe the big decision at the end? We're always hoping for a decision text, a cover text at the end. Anything that gives you hope, or quite the opposite, anything that really frustrates you? There was just a question a few minutes ago, someone asking that, you know, scientists are taking the back seat for politicians, but are you frustrated about these COPs, or was it a successful COP for you, Ugo?
I think like answering this question, if a COP is successful or not, really depends on, you know, where you talk and where you talk from, what is your point of view. I thought at the beginning that this COP was not successful because, so the two main outcomes of this COP, one was the agreement on loss and damage. And as you explained, Heidi, the basic idea behind loss and damage is that the global south should receive more money from the global north that is mainly responsible carbon emission. And the second outcome of this COP was there was no clear agreement on reducing the carbon emission. So at the beginning, I was like, wow, this COP is a bit of failure. We couldn't commit on decreasing the emission. But then I was thinking, for like half of the world and even more, and especially in Africa or in Asia, this COP was a huge success. I was looking at the news actually, just out of curiosity, looking at the news in different countries. And I could really see that in Europe, the news were a bit, wow, this COP was a failure because we couldn't agree on reducing the emission. But I was looking at the news in Senegal and a lot of Francophone countries in Africa. And for them, it was a success because it was the first time that it was really agreed about this loss and damage. So I said, yes, COP is a success. And it's always a success to put that many people and that many countries around the table to discuss about something. Just for that, I think it's a success. And this year, for a lot of people, it was about loss and damage, which is a huge success and a huge step to continue.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. And it's funny how we are polarized, right? Only seeing it a certain way. I really feel that some people, even before COP started, said it was going to be a failure, that there was a lot of COP bashing this year. It seems to be pretty trendy. But thank you so much for mentioning these successes, because you're totally right. It depends where you're based, what your background is. And indeed, if you're from the global south, this was a magnificent COP and a massive success. It was really decades in the making. And I'll ask you the same question, Ximena, because I know the two of you, and I try to add a little part of me in this, but there was also a massive piece of news when it comes to the cryosphere, which is what we study, the three of us, the snow and ice regions in the world. Can you tell us a little bit more about why glaciologists are kind of quite happy about what happened at COP27?
Yes, of course. I mean, in this COP, I mean, for us as like glaciologists was huge because we finally got, the amazing success to bring about 20 countries from all over the world, not just polar or mountain countries, to gather together for the cryosphere, which was amazing. This was an effort, like huge, like amazing effort coming from Chile, from Iceland, from the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, and many other people that was behind, including, of course, the early career scientists supporting and others, of course. So this AMI, this group, ambition on melting ice, on sea level rise and mountain water resources, is this group like the objective is to raise the importance of the cryosphere in our planet. So it was a massive thing, and I mean personally it was very important to me because Mexico it is a country where I mean we don't have the ice embedded in our culture, but we're beginning to understand why it is important to us for countries that don't have like these huge masses of ice, but still the impacts of losing ice are paramount. We cannot even grasp what this means to us. So it was huge. It is, to us, I think it is a huge light of hope, on the community.
I mean, this is amazing. I mean, it took so much work from every person involved at COP to make this work. And I was just so proud. I mean, so happy to be there when it happened. And, you know, it's too easy to criticize COPs. There was so many good news, and the AMI declaration is really one of them. But I have another question for you, Ximena, because I know that you've managed to get your country, I mean, it's not a simple thing. You managed to get your country to agree to take part in this. And I think people are wondering, you know, as someone attending COP, what is the actual difference you can make? And can you perhaps tell us, from what you can share, how much work did it take from you to make your country, I mean, which is incredible, to make this big decision? What happened behind the scene? What really helped to tip the balance to convince them that this was important?
Well, you know, it's a so hard question. It's a question so hard to answer, because sometimes, I mean, most of us as early career scientists come to these events, at least from my side. I thought, okay, that would be amazing to really make a change, like a really change, no, for my country or the world. And sometimes, you know, I have learned in these 2 years that you cannot imagine the power of really listening. It is amazing. I know that so many people are talking about the exercise of listening, but you cannot imagine how much you can learn from people, not just what they say, their words, but actually how they move, how they react to your presence, or, I don't know, your background. So one of the key aspects of achieving this with Mexico was just sitting, listening to how everything was working out. I mean, this progress was started 1 year ago. So I started just listening to these people to understand how or which were their concerns. I mean, the agenda, of course, of my country. And then I started like talking about why it is important for Mexico to be involved and to drive the momentum of protecting the cryosphere, why it would be super important for a country such as Mexico to be one of the leaders driving this initiative. So that's how, I mean, in short, happened, and that is how we managed, because this is a teamwork, like a huge teamwork, and yeah, that was the result. So yeah, we have to perhaps wait a little, listen, and then take action. Yeah.
Wow, I think that's a good lesson to all of us, because we all want to make a change. We all want to make a difference, especially at the big climate conference every year. But more often than not, we try to bombard people with information because we think that our agenda is the most important thing. But if you don't understand where the other person is coming from, their worries, their own priorities, your language, your messaging will not be adapted to what they're looking for. And again, I think it really demonstrates that at these big climate conferences, you have the official part, the stuff that will happen no matter what. But then you have all these informal moments, which are actually the moments when you can really make a difference. I mean, I remember just hanging around the pavilion, and you have all these ministers and heads of states passing by, and you try to grab them and share with them a story. And it's all about the human connection. It's all about, you know, as you said, looking at the body language of the person, trying to listen to what they have to say. And if there is a chance, trying to share an impactful message with them. But don't hesitate if you have questions in the chat. We're here for another handful of minutes. The comments are going by very, very quickly, so sometimes we miss them, but don't hesitate to ask your question again. And perhaps I will share my own highlights, and definitely the declaration on the cryosphere was absolutely amazing, and we'll make sure to share the link when we share the replay of the video this evening, so you can take a look at what is taking place in these big documents, in these big declarations. But one thing, I think to me, one of my other highlights was one of the sessions I attended, which was from the youth from Scandinavia, from the Nordic youth. And they had this amazing event that was attended by a lot of the ministers from the Nordic countries. And they shared such an impactful message. I couldn't have been more impressed. They were so clear about the need to phase out fossil fuels. They were so clear about the need for more social justice, because without social justice, there is no climate justice. And I was really empowered seeing these kids. They're not kids, they were like in their early 20s. But I thought, my gosh, if they can do this, stand on this stage, facing all these ministers, not worried about a thing because they understand that their message is more important than anything else. I mean, we can all do this. And to see all these youth at COP, it was also the first time there was a pavilion, so one of these stages for the children and youth. And it was definitely where the party was taking place. I mean, there was like amazing music there every night, and the atmosphere was fantastic. But we need the youth to be there, because this is, you know, we're discussing the future they will inherit. And to me, it is just so very important to have young scientists joining, but also young activists, of course, young indigenous leaders, indigenous representatives. And for once, I mean, I must say, I'm usually super depressed about COP. For once, I left COP27 full of energy, full of hope, because of all the good things that happened. But I cannot see any further questions or comments, but perhaps what I love to do is always to ask scientists to share maybe the one thing, the one impactful message they want to share with the people watching today. Is there something you want to share about COP, about a call to action that people can do? What can people do perhaps to try to make a change and maybe help us to protect the cryosphere? Who wants to start? It's a broad question. Ugo, do you want to start? Or Ximena?
No.
Yeah. That's a broad question. I think we, as you said, Heidi, that we all have a voice, we all have a power, and I think it's time really to think that you have power to change stuff. So we all act at different scale. We met people that are minister, but this minister will have to listen to other people, to scientists, to young people, to activists, to all the voices that can be raised. So on your side, what you can do is share the stories that you know about climate change, read about it, learn about it, and kind of don't wait that, your door or your house will be affected by climate change to act, because this is going to happen sooner than you would expect. So we have a lot of time because we can make a change, and especially don't think that it's already committed, because every degrees, every change we will make will still make us future look better than if we do nothing. So that would be my take home, like still keep an optimistic view, and it's all about, the system of values and sharing what matters for you.
Yeah, well, that's quite empowering. Thank you, Ugo. Ximena, do you have something to share, a call to action to the people watching tonight?
Yes, I mean, we have seen that, as I mentioned, politics is moving too slow, and we cannot wait for politicians to do the stuff. I believe that we have to start finding the right people with limitless passion and the values that are required to start activating what has to be done. So actually, one of my takeaways about this COP was really meeting people such as you, Ugo, as you, Heidi. We have to, look out there. They're brilliant people. They're fantastic people with great ideas and with honest intentions to really change the lives of millions of people. So let's get out there. Let's find them. Let's team up with them. And let's start building these communities of hope and deep transformation. And by the private sector, which will be like key on this process, give them the money, trust them, and they will really change the world. That would be my message.
Wow, fantastic! Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ximena. Thank you for this. And we just got a question in the chat that's asked: what can someone who is not attending COP do to influence the COP? And maybe I can try to answer this. And thank you, Jan, for the question. I think it's all about making sure our own decision makers are held accountable. I mean, as you just said, Ximena, the politicians are moving too slowly at the moment. There's no doubt about this. But we have to make sure to vote for the right people who will be attending COP every year. Make sure we vote for people who understand the science. Make sure we vote for people who, if they don't understand the science, at least respect the work of scientists. And I think if you're not attending COP but want to influence the negotiations, make sure you educate yourself about what will be the big theme at this COP. And don't hesitate to maybe this is a bit cheeky, but to bombard your decision makers with messages. Make sure that you use your voice to make a difference, because we are starting to see the power of collective action. We're seeing this for deep sea mining at the moment. We're seeing this for renewable energies, for health and climate change. And we can see that when we are organized, and this is what the both of you have said also, when we work together, this is really when miracles can happen. And maybe my own call to action would be that we shouldn't also expect everything from these COPs. COPs are very important. They take place every year. This is the one chance to bring all the countries in the world together to discuss the best strategies to fight the climate crisis. But we shouldn't expect miracles. I mean, let's face it, we have 196 countries in the same room trying to agree on the same text, on the same words. All the decisions are based on consensus, and sometimes it's not enough. And so this is why I think the work doesn't end at COP. It begins before the COP. It continues after the COP. And it's very important to vote for the right people, use your own voices, and make sure we are organized. Let's have a collective action. Instead of criticizing our neighbor and pointing the finger at what is going wrong, let's try to be constructive. And, let's all try to be on the side of solution. We're all part of the problem in one way or another, but I think we all want to be on the side of solutions. So let's do this. Right? Well, perhaps this is the conclusion to this first live session. Well, I want to thank so much Ximena and Ugo for joining me tonight. It was a little bit of a test to see if people would be interested in this kind of content. I've seen lots of friends joining from Colombia, from France, maybe from Mexico as well. So thank you all so very much for joining us today. And if you have any further questions, make sure you follow Ximena, make sure you follow Ugo. You can see now both of their profiles, and continue asking us questions about the science, about these climate conferences. And let's remember to focus on action. Let's continue to focus on impact. So we'll make sure that the replay of the video is available. And let's continue being in touch. And I think I'll try to organize the next live session about the glaciers of the Pyrenees between Spain and France, which are in dire state, but they still have a lot to tell us. And there are amazing scientists working on these glaciers. So I'll try to sort something out in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.